House of Representatives, a senior member of the House Intelligence Committee and one of the ranking members of a subcommittee on the Technical and Tactical Intelligence. The Democrat representing Burbank, Pasadena, and Glendale. Thank you very much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Well, let's talk first about something that happened just this past week. The Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. Now, this is an organization within the government, within the executive branch, established by Congress, independent. They came out and said the NSA collection of these phone records is a violation of law. It's even a violation of the Patriot Act. Do you agree?
I think the legal question is a very close question. They also said that legal or otherwise, it's a program that we ought to do away with, at least in its current form. And that I do agree with. I think that's much more clear, frankly, than the close legal question. I think with all these programs, we have to ask ourselves, is it constitutional and legal? Is it effective, and is it structured in a way that maximizes our security and minimizes any risk to the privacy interests of the American people? And it certainly, from my view, doesn't meet that third test. I think it ought to be restructured. I think the telephone companies ought to keep their own data. I don't see why the government needs to collect all this, millions and millions of call records. And I think we can still get the information we need when there's an emergency.
Politically, it's an interesting debate because you are on the side of the Republican National Committee, which came out this past week and said they want it done away with. Yet the President of the United States, who last week said, I'm going to change the program but not get rid of it. Why is the President wrong?
Well, I don't think the President is wrong. The President said that he thinks we should do away with bulk collection also. So he's made the decision that he doesn't think the government ought to acquire all this.
Right, but it's still there and you can still collect it.
Well, what the President is saying is we shouldn't collect it anymore, but I'm not sure who ought to hold on to this data. And the President has said that he thinks that the program generally has value. I agree that there is some utility to the program. I don't think that utility outweighs the privacy costs. And I go, I guess, beyond what the President has said so far, because I think that the phone companies should keep their own data. We should go to them when we have reason to believe that a particular number is connected to a terrorist plot, but we should end the practice of this vast collection of this bulk telephone data.
Let's talk about Sochi, Russia. The concern, obviously, is over safety and security. You have an intelligence community in the United States that doesn't get along with the intelligence community in the former Soviet Union. Talk to us about whether or not you think it is safe for any of your constituents to go to the Winter Olympic Games.
You know, I think there is a risk. Unquestionably, terrorists would love to attack the Olympics. It's such a high-profile event, and it would be a way to embarrass Putin. At the same time, I think it's a manageable risk. If I had tickets, I would go. If constituents
You'd take your family.
I would take my family. Now, you know, a lot of it is very individual. How much risk are you willing to assume? But frankly, I think that with all the security in Sochi, probably the most dangerous part of going to the Olympics would be actually the drive to get there. The same is true in the United States. There's much greater risk of dying in a car accident than a terrorist attack. So as I look at it, there are other places that are probably far more dangerous than Russia during the Olympics, which I would not bring my family to. But I think that the risks of going to the Olympics are, you know, within reasonable limits.
Although the State Department, from what I understand, is telling Olympic athletes not to wear American flags, not to be so obvious as to where you were from that you become a target. Well, that's somewhat disconcerting.
You know, that's a sad truth about a lot of places in the world. I was in Liberia several years ago, and there were American flags on the vehicle, and I said, wow, what a change this is. And they said, yes, in Liberia, there's still a great love for America. I wish that was true in more places, but I'm not surprised that the State Department is giving that advice.
Before we go any further, let's go back for a moment to the NSA. Do you believe, though, that there's a disconnect between what people who are contacting your office and those who are opposed to this program, what their concerns are and what the needs are in the intelligence community?
There is a conflict here, and there are costs to be weighed. Several of us had a meeting with the President on this issue 2 weeks ago. And I think he's using exactly the right analysis, and that is how much privacy is at stake here. And with the metadata program, it's a lot. It's millions of records, phone records of innocent Americans that have nothing to do with terrorism. And then what do you get in terms of a national security value for that? And I think both as that privacy board said this week, as well as the President's own review board said last month, the value we get has been very limited. And if we can get that value in other ways, Without having to obtain all that data, I think we should.
Is the concern what would happen in the future as opposed to what is happening right now? That is, the government really isn't interested in your private life.
That is the concern. On the positive side, there hasn't been any sign of intentional abuse of this metadata. So many people say, hey, if it's not broken, why fix it? And I think the answer is because this administration hasn't abused this. It doesn't mean that down the road some other administration or other personnel couldn't abuse having all this information. Even though this metadata doesn't include the content of our calls, and there's a lot of confusion about that. People think that everyone's phone calls is being listened into. That's not true. But nonetheless, it does tell, what numbers have been in touch with other numbers, essentially who you've called, when you've called them, how long you've talked with them. And that's a lot of information if the government wanted to abuse it.
Should Eric Snowden be pardoned?
No, I don't think so. His disclosures, while they've kindled a very important public debate, have also done us enormous damage. And a lot of the documents that he took have no bearing on the privacy interests of the American people, and indeed don't have any bearing on the privacy interests of people outside the country. But they're of great value to the Russian military and the Chinese military. I don't understand why he stole those documents if, what he says about his motivations is correct. I think, frankly, he should have stayed in this country. He should have been willing to, as a civilly disobedient person, if that's how he views himself, been willing to face the music and make the case. But running off to these authoritarian regimes that have no respect for privacy whatsoever is ironic, to say the least.
And one of those regimes, of course, President Putin has invited him to attend the Sochi Olympics, from what I understand.
He never ceases to miss an opportunity to poke us in the eye.
Thank you very much, Congressman Adam Schiff. I do appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Up next, fighting the rash of hit-and-run incidents in Southern California on our roads and freeways. That when we return.